Okay, very good afternoon to all of you. I'm the civil servant, and therefore you're just going to listen to me for a while as I present my rules-based set of slides. No, but seriously, I thought that the conversation in the previous session was extremely stimulating. It was extremely stimulating to me because sometime 15 years ago, I used to be a scenario planner. I used to be a futurist with the Singapore government. And I used to be having conversations about things like what the world was going to look like in 2015. And what the world was going to look like in 2025. The funny thing about that was that during that time, when I was positing the future, thinking about the future, maybe not in as eloquent and deep and wise terms as the speakers before me, but just looking at technology, I had come to the conclusion at that time that around now, we would all be driving in hydrogen fuel cell cars, right? We would be definitely using autonomous vehicles a lot more than we are today. And a lot of other futuristic premises. Now, fast forward to 2015, and all of us realize, even though it's Back to the Future Day next week, that we're actually not doing a lot of the things that we thought we would be doing. And that made me think, the future is not something you think about. The future is actually something you build. And the future is something that you build only when you think it's of use to the people around you. And in our case, it was the people of Singapore. So the question was, with technology, how could we build a smart nation that best benefited the people of Singapore, people like you and me and my grandmother and my mother and my neighbors? And a lot of the answers lay in data. But again, remembering how futuristic I had been, I was keen to see how we worked with data, not in the abstract. That is, I have deeply resisted the urge to show you a lot of the things that we're doing regarding making the city more of a machine. That is, creating a nationwide sensor network, having lots and lots of technical solutions, the OS here and there and all, and analyzing that data or analyzing telco data. I'm not going to show you any of that because I think it's frankly quite scary. And also because I'm not sure as yet how that's going to lead to any meaningful action or implication that would affect my mother, my sister, my brother, and my children. What we focused on instead in the IDA with our data science and our digital services capabilities is designing a data city that is human scale and that meets the needs of our people. Let me give you an example. On the 29th of September, at 1 o'clock, 1300 hours, a 73-year-old male person collapsed somewhere in Singapore, right? This is not uncommon. In fact, the Singapore Civil Defence Force has recorded a 7% increase in the number of emergency calls it has received to its 995 hotline year on year from last year to this year. Okay, so I can tell you that it's like for some reason, more people are, about almost 10% more people are collapsing year on year in the current situation. A passersby called the number 995, which is our emergency number, to notify the SCDF. Now, there was a problem here, and the SCDF knew it well, and so do all our hospitals. Firstly, the ambulance takes 11 minutes to come. And that's the case for everyone here. If you call an ambulance, it'll take 11 minutes to come. If you get a fast bike from the SCDF, so they have a fast bike service, fast response bike service, it takes 8 minutes to come. Now, the problem here is that the chances of survival diminish dramatically with every single minute of a delayed CPR and defibrillation. So you can see that if you have no CPR, if you hit the 11th minute and you try something there, you have a 0.2% chance of survival. With every minute that goes forward, you can see if you bring it forward, it's a 2.8% chance of survival, a 20% chance of survival. If you push it to the 6th or 7th minute, and a 30% chance of survival if there's also advanced cardiac life support. It means that there is a 100% increase in the survival rate if we can get the CPR and the defibrillation done with AED much earlier. Volunteer was actually notified and arrived at the location at exactly 13:06 hours. So it took him 6 hours to get there. And he administered the CPR and defibrillation a full 5 minutes earlier than when the paramedics arrived. The paramedics arrived at exactly 13:11 hours, 11 minutes, as I've mentioned, for the ambulance to arrive. Now, how did he get there? He actually got there through a crowdsourcing mechanism that we have called MyResponder, which takes data from the 995 call center, and it puts it into an app. And the design is very simple. Volunteers, whether CPR trained or not, can volunteer within the app, and they will get notified if they're within 400 meters of an incident. Usually they're even much less than 400 meters of an incident, and they will know all the locations of the nearest AED machines. This, we think, is a perfect example of how simple data can have a huge impact, because what we've really done is match the data on the collapsed incident or victim to the data that was required by the person responding. Now, governments are traditionally concerned with the allocation of resources. They think about what to spend on, they think about who to spend it on. And this is the perfect example of a problem that you maybe cannot solve with having more subsidies, money thrown in there. You can't solve it with more grants, you can't solve it with more spending. What you need to do is to be able to gather the available data and notify the right people at the right time with the right information. What we really need to do with data, in other words, is not necessarily to use it to reconstruct what is a very machine-like city and make it run better, necessarily, but to get a sense of awareness out of that data and for it to be in the right hands at the right time so someone can take action. So let me start with awareness. The government does have sensors all over the island, especially environmental sensors. This is the census belonging to the National Environment Agency. It has a great sensor network for something we're all very familiar with, which is the haze. And NEA's sensor network around the island does allow us to track the haze, and it allows us to respond by closing schools, issuing warnings, and so on. In fact, we do the haze app. So we do try and push out hourly readings to people so that they can conduct their activities. We have even more granular data. This, for example, is a video of our taxi tracking information system. For us, we collect it in a near real-time basis. We track every single taxi in Singapore. It is possible to track every taxi in Singapore and see them move across the island and see them congregate in certain spots at certain times of the day and be more available at other times of the day. And this is a motherlode of interesting data all about different taxi behaviors, taxi pickups, locations, and so on. That is very useful to our Ministry of Transportation. We are moving increasingly into setting up infrastructure to allow our agencies to collect data more easily. We already, as I've mentioned, track the haze with our sensor network, but there are many other things that we could or should be tracking. For example, how many people have reported sick in the last 24 hours with cough or sneezing or fevers yesterday? We don't know. What are the locations most susceptible to traffic jams? I think one of our colleagues is speaking about traffic jams and traffic later on. Yes. And what could we do to relieve traffic congestion? More abstractly, we want to know what is the use, what has been the result of our education subsidies or our healthcare subsidies, or the money that we give on grants to companies to be more productive. We all need data to find out the effectiveness of a lot of our government schemes. The end goal, ultimately, is awareness. So we can do that with a range of the unstructured data I've mentioned before you from the sensors that we're putting in place, but also a lot of the data that we need is not unstructured. It is not sensor data. It's actually just data that is like MyResponder. It is data that is provided to the government, either by administrative means or because citizens want to provide it to the government or want to provide it to whatever companies for the purposes of making their lives better. So one part, building the physical infrastructure to gather sensor data. Another big part, enabling the processes to allow a more manual gathering of data from individuals and also from administrative sources. And the last part of that would be to present that information in a comprehensible manner. What we've realized, because we run something called data.gov.sg, which is the open data movement for the Singapore government, please feel free to look at it at a site called beta.data.gov.sg. We've realized that a lot of this information is sitting in almost incomprehensible silos. A lot of government agencies collect data in manners that make it easy to do management reporting, but makes no sense to a computer. So it turns out that people don't think like computers. So their rows are wrong, their X's and their Y axis are all wrong. We actually had an exercise in the Singapore government to clean up all that data once, where we said, you need to put it in a machine-readable format for data.gov.sg, and so that people can access the over 10,000 data sets in our open data portal. And we said, well, for example, you can have formats like .csv. And what we found was that there were government agencies that had Excel files or PDF, and after PDF, they put .csv. So, I think these are the things that we are trying to build up with our people so that we can better understand how to bring the data together in a comprehensible manner. And the next part, of course, is not just awareness, but action. Action requires a lot of coordination. So I go back to my responder. The event occurs, and that is important because it allows my responder to notify the closest person who can help. This is really no different from Uber. It's almost crowdsourcing the life-saving experience in the same way as hailing a cab. The truth is, becoming a data city does not require having a massive team of data scientists. It doesn't mean that we need to have giant servers producing a lot of, crunching a lot of big data. What is most impactful to the citizen here and now is providing the right information at the right time to the right person so they can act on it. In the short term, it's the cab driver, or it is someone who is CPR trained. In the medium term, for example, it could be identifying problems in the city that need to be fixed. This is the One Service app which we designed together with the Municipal Services Office, and we run this application. Before this application, it was well known that if you had a complaint to the Singapore government, you would have to look for which agency to complain to. And that was not often very easy because, for example, if you have a cleanliness issue in a park, is it the problem of the Environment Agency or the Parks Board, right? So it wasn't very easy. This routes the information very easily to the appropriate agency to handle and allows people to follow up on cases, but it also allows us to analyze that data so that we can predict when the next incident or correlated incident might next occur. Here's an example of one of the many different forms that you had to fill in before One Service was created. And if you compare it to the previous way of reporting the issue, One Service has been a lot more effective in gathering the data and acting on it, which is more important. And since launching it in January this year, we've had more than 15,000 cases logged, reported, and acted on. In the long run, it will mean using data to plan our city better. We have various methods by which we are using geospatial data to really look at the whole city. We're fortunate to be a country and a city in order to plan our city to a higher degree of accuracy. One map is the one map that allows the display of different overlays from many different government agencies. URA has an e-planner system that enables them to very easily, even on an iPad, see all these overlays and make use of the data. They can find out demographic data. They can do mobility data on how traffic is moving. And it will tell you things like where to site the next childcare center or elder care center or where to upgrade lifts. And this has been very effective. The next step we're moving forward to, just in terms of geospatial data, is to create what we call Virtual Singapore. The Virtual Singapore project aims to create a virtual 3D version of the entire island with fidelity to reality and scale. This is Yuhua, by the way. This is Yuhua in Jurong. Just to be able to analyze where best to place things, but also where best to put things like solar panels, or design flats, or design flats such that the shade from one does not affect the view from the other. Another good example of how data is not just about awareness, but about action, is an app that we put out recently that crowdsources bus routes. This is called Beeline, and it is an experimental initiative to try and run express buses. The value is not from the operation of the buses, but the value is from using the data to identify the best express routes for people to get from point A to point B and save time. It is a combination of crowdsourcing the routes that you want, you can download this, and easy link data. We've had about 9,000 routes suggested to us so far. And the reason for it was we've simply felt that since the time we were in secondary school or JC or whatever, the bus routes have been exactly the same. The 174 runs the 174, the 171 runs the 171, 62, they're all the same. But the demography and living space of people in Singapore actually has changed. So there's no reason to have the same bus route. So the best way to get the new bus route would be from a mixture of actual travel data as well as consumer crowdsourcing. So in conclusion, I suppose what I'm trying to say is that the Smart Nation platform that we're building has many different elements: connecting, collecting, comprehending, and creating. The key to all of these things is to look for the data that makes most sense in the hands of the person that can create and do the best out of that for people like you and me. Thank you.